Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. In today's episode of my podcast story, we have Larry G. Dix II, best-selling author, entrepreneur, and the insightful host behind Born or Made podcast. Larry's show dives deep in with elite entrepreneurs, passionate athletes, legacy-driven leaders to uncover how the top 1% actually think and operate. His journey is anything but conventional. Starting in the lumber yards at just 18, Larry built his first multi-million-dollar company from scratch through pure grit and determination, not privilege or outside investors. As the founder of Apex, a leading truss manufacturing company and soon to be president of the Structural Building Components Association, he brings real-world business wisdom to his podcast that can't be found in textbooks. He's here today to share how his personal philosophy of do what's right has shaped not just his business success, but how also his approach to podcasting and connecting with audiences who are hungry for authentic leadership insights. Tell us your name and name of your podcast.
Well, good afternoon. Glad to be on here. My name is Larry Dix, and my podcast is called the Born or Made Podcast. So we talk about people's journeys, basically, is it of through entrepreneurship and business.
Wow. Thank you so much, Larry, for being here. I'm excited to unpack your podcast story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if people want to listen, you can listen to bornormadepodcast.com. You got LarryGDix.com. Any way you'd like, we're there.
Yeah. The name Born or Made, was it the first choice? How did you come up with that name?
So it started off really is I started writing a book in October of 23. My mom had died a couple of years, and I just started kind of thinking about, as I'd listened, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in business for 25 and a half years. And I just kind of started realizing, like, was I born this way? Was I made this way? And it just really got me asking the questions to myself. And I really didn't have a way to get an answer because, as a lot of fathers, they're busy building careers and stuff like that, and a lot of that stuff. So I really couldn't ask my dad. He's still alive. And I just started really kind of thinking about it a lot. And I wrote the book, and then I kind of realized that I was kind of a combination of both. And then it got me to the point to where I just was like, well, what? I'm just like you are. We're just human, right? And are they different? Am I different? Am I unique or whatever? And so I just started this podcast called Born or Made Podcast. And I just started talking to entrepreneurs and just kind of want to know their journey. And that's kind of where it came from. And we asked the final question at the end of every podcast is, do you think you were born or made? And you get amazing answers. Some born, some made, some a combination. I had one that was built the other day. And just, listen to some of these guys, and it's just an amazing, and ladies, and just, going through their history. It's really cool actually to hear people's answers and just their journey.
How old is the podcast?
So it's about a year and a half. We started not a year and a half, about a year and 4 months. So we've done about 62 podcasts have dropped, and I've done about 85 podcasts that are in the queue. And that would have been, it started in, I believe it was May of 24 was our first published podcast.
May of 2024. Oh, okay. You shared with us what the podcast is about, and before you started podcasting, did you have any experience regarding podcasting prior to you starting yours?
No, I'd never been on a single one. Matter of fact, the first one I did was just kind of like, I didn't even know what to do. I spent a lot of time studying the person, and I realized it was too rigid, too formed. Like we were following a process, and I just didn't like it. So I started spending less time studying these people. Like if I was interviewing you, I would literally be like, so where were you born? First thing I always ask is, where am I talking to you from? And then that kind of loosens people up. And then so people are a little edgy, they're like, well, what's he going to ask me? And I'm like, so where were you born? And, and then I walk through this entire process of, from the time they were born till, they go through college or they make their first career move. And so by the time you get to the final story, it just, you realize that they're really calm at that point, because we can all talk about our childhood, right? We get a little nervous when we're talking about business or what have you done great? And I'm like, I don't know if I've done anything great, but you go through this process and it loosens people up. Most people like yourself, they see you today. but they don't know where you were born or how you got where you are. And so then it actually opens people up to more that people are just we're all regular people, right? Everybody gets made fun of in grade school at some point, and some of them are really successful, and then you find out they weren't very good in school, or some of them were very successful and they were brains, we call them brains, right? Or we're super intelligent people all through high school.
Yeah.
You find out they were drug addicts or alcoholics or failed 3 times and went bankrupt. I mean, you just find out all these unique stories about each individual. And it's really cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And it's been 1 year and 4 months. And for me, I'm curious to know, has there been a challenge you faced, right? As regards to podcasting when you first got started? And if so, I would love to know how you overcome it.
Well, the biggest challenge is just knowing what to do, right? Like you're doing your podcast and you try to follow and you think, oh, I've got this very, strict, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, you find that if you really, I think the really good podcasters, I'm not saying that I'm one of them yet, but I'm trying, is you do it over and over again, is you just go with the flow. You let the person you're interviewing kind of take the lead. You're guiding them, and then they may hear them say something, and you got to sit back and wait and listen, and then ask the question you were thinking about. And it may be 5 minutes, because as you know, when you get guys like me on here, we'll talk for 10 minutes and you're just standing there, right? And so it learns. But the number one thing that I did learn is I learned to listen. And I was, so many entrepreneurs and people are highly ADHD. They're functionally moving constantly, from boom, 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 boom all day long. And then that again helped me to like focus and listen to the person that I'm interviewing. And that was really probably the hardest part for me at first, was just listening.
Yeah. And this is not just podcasting, that's a personal skill that extends into other areas of interaction with people. Because now when you're talking to people outside of your podcast, you're like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like
okay.
yesterday, I was at this new restaurant in my little hometown, and I find myself like, "Hey, so where are you from?" I'll ask the waitress, and I just kind of like, "Are you from where we live, or did you move here from New York, or the West Coast?" I live on the East Coast, or and you just kind of find out things, and you find yourself podcasting, interviewing when you're eating dinner, and you got to be like, "Whoa, hold on there,
Uh,
Larry, you're not," you do have to turn that off. It
yeah,
is
I
kind
mean,
of
people
fun,
love
but
to
you do
talk about
learn that.
themselves. People love to talk about
Yeah.
themselves. And so, yes, as long as you genuinely care and you really want to know, people will share it.
Yeah, I get excited. Like some of the things that I find out from people, I'm just like, dude, what? Like, you find out like people are swimmers, or, they're jump rope, national champions, or they were, kickboxers, or, you just find out they're dancers. Some of them are, you find out are musicians. One guy that I still keep in touch with to this day, he's a D1 football player, like Division 1. Father played for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a world-renowned artist. You
Wow.
see this guy, and there's this behemoth of a man sitting there, and he's sitting with an easel painting. And you're just like, how is this giant a painter? Just stuff like that. So we have these preconceived ideas when we see people, because we all judge people, right? Everybody's like,
Yeah.
oh, don't believe you judge. You maybe not. Maybe it's not judging. You're definitely jockeying. It's like, what's the angle on this guy, or what's this gal do? And then you find out that 99% of the time it's nothing that you think. It's
Yeah.
like the guy that you see, and he's big and scary, and they're usually the most gentle giants on the planet. So
Yeah.
you do learn a
Yeah.
lot, and it's an amazing world out here, because we're all so much the same, but yet we're so unique. And that's where the podcasting comes in. You find out about all these amazing people and what they've
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Before I ask you about the personal, the impact, and the growth of the podcast, I'd love to know, get a sneak peek behind the scenes of how the podcast episodes actually get made, right? From idea to down to publishing, who does the editing if you're the one, what tools do you use for editing? And, just walk me through like kind of like a tour of the production of the podcast episode.
So we try to interview everybody. So I'm trying to do it. My publicist is trying to find people. We're constantly trying to find people. And we're not like, oh, I only want, men and women that own manufacturing, because that's what I do for a living, is manufacturing. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking to artists, to people that are doing, medicines, nutrition, to underwear. I mean, literally, I mean, we're doing the full gamut of people. But we just try to find anybody. As far as editing, what we started off with was with a company out of Boca, and we were using their studio. And so we started using them for submitting and stuff like that. We've now since gotten to that point, and to be honest with you, my publicist handles most of that, so I don't get into the details.
Yeah.
We do AI editing, but we still do an actual human listening to it and stuff like that to make sure there's no gross errors. We make sure stuff like that. We'd like to let the client review it before, just in case if they say a misstep or something like that. But I mean, we're pretty free flowing. We're not trying to get stuck in this thing because it's not like we're interviewing people in controversial type, businesses or trying to get them. We're not political or anything like that. We're just talking about people's lives. And so, it's very, very free flowing. And then we publish it out on every format that we possibly can find. So, and my publicist Bridgetta does all that and make sure it gets to the right, formats and
Mm,
stuff. So
you say we, other than your publicist, is there someone else who takes care of the editing and all those other aspects?
yeah, she subs that out to to individuals to do that. I don't do any of it. So when I say team, it's really just me, and then one of my kids helps do some stuff and some stuff like that. But no, it's still pretty. We're not really that big, but we're getting to the point that we're working more with YouTube, so we're getting 1,600 to 3,000, 4,000 views, things like that. So it's starting to get there, and we've interviewed some amazing people, and so really is I'm learning through this process. I don't know how long you've been doing yours. I think it takes a couple of years. I mean, we're just kind of, even a year and 4 months in, man, we still don't even know we don't know. I mean, we're still figuring things out and it's evolving. People are using AI a lot. Like it's amazing. But, there's still the human ear that, voice inflection, things like that are still, people do a better job of that. I still believe in humans, but there's definitely AI is definitely helps catch the big stuff for sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we just kind of pick up and we do them in person. So I go to different studios. So we're doing 4 different studios throughout the United States. We'll bring in people for several days and do them. I just did 5 in Stanford a couple of weeks ago that'll be coming out, things like that. So we do them at my home office, which is my barn where you'll see, if you check my website out, that's where you'll see all my stuff is. And then we go to actual studios. We're going to be doing one in LA here not too long and within the next couple
Yeah,
of months, depending on our schedules.
I know you just gave us a zoomed out rundown of uh the studio, the logistics. Since you do in person, I'm curious to know how does the logistics look like? In terms of, because a lot of persons I think they're doing in person, but they're like, oh, that's quite expensive and all that. And, walk me through why did you decide to do in person? Why not just do virtual the way we're doing this call now? And you're in your place, I'm in my place.
Well, that's a great question because I like doing these, like you and I doing them, but I would much rather be in the room with you. So I do both because now I think pre-COVID, no one would have ever thought that you and I would be doing these video calls like we do now, right?
Yeah,
There's just something about being in person. You get pictures, you can see people. You may be 7 foot tall, but I can't tell because you're sitting in the thing. I mean, I'm 5 foot nothing. I'm short, but I look tall because I'm sitting up tall on my chair. So I mean, there's stuff like that that kind of is cool. But I did start in person a lot, and I was very disappointed because I couldn't get people to come. And then I
yeah,
realized it wasn't that big of a deal unless you're, a Joe Rogan. People aren't going to fly to Virginia to do a podcast with me yet. I hope that that's the case. But there's one podcast we're trying to get on right now. We're going to have to fly out to Las Vegas to be on that podcast, but it's a big podcast. Odds are, I don't know where you're based out of, but people probably aren't going to fly to be on a podcast with you. So this is even better because you and I can do it and people are very comfortable. And at the end of the day, nobody's looking at your pretty face. They're just listening to that amazing voice anyway.
yeah. Yeah, I get it. Like it's always nice to do in person, right? You
Yes.
can be there and have the conversation. You don't have to worry, oh, what if the network goes out and the internet connectivity and all those things out there. And I feel like you get to meet, we shake hands, and before the podcast interview, you can say, yeah, How you doing? Well, I know there'll be a lot of lengthy talk. We'll talk before they say, okay, yeah, that's true. Let's record the podcast.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
just better. I mean, there's just something about you and I being in the same room that just gets better. You can feel your energy. You can feel things differently. You just, you have a great smile, but it's even better in person, right? So it's just those type of things that you can't pick up on with, us doing it this way through a Zoom calls, or I call it Zoom, but remote. And so yeah, I mean, if I could do them all in person, I would be thrilled with that. Like that would be awesome to me. But,
yeah,
you think about you and I'm trying to do 52 podcasts a year, which I'm doing, one a week. That would be hard to do getting people coming in. So we're learning by going to places and setting it up over several months, getting them scheduled. Then we can get four,
yeah.
five, six, seven. I've done as many as eight. I think I've done 8 podcasts in one day. I never
Wow,
recommend that for anybody that's watching. I
wow.
just I was done. I didn't eat all day. I was bam, 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 bam. Dumbest thing you can ever do.
Uh,
4 is my max now.
uh,
I'm like 4 and I'm tapping. I'm like, get me out. I'm
how do you
out.
know your limits if you don't test your limits?
That's right. Well, don't even get me started on that. I'm
Uh,
all about that. Like you never know your limit. And then guess what? When you hit your
uh,
limit, that's your new limit. So then you got to, if you can do 8, well, why can't you do 9? Right. So yeah, it's the same thing. And that's, you
I'm
talk about
glad you're
all
the
these
one who
people.
said that.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
glad you're the
true.
one who said that. If you can do eight, why can't you do nine?
That's right. And
Man,
then
it's not
shit,
it's
then you
not
get messed
easy.
up. Then you got to do 10.
It's not easy. Doing interviews back to back, back to back.
And one, you
That's
get one of the guys or gals you're
mm,
talking to, and you're really, because I mean, you know how it is. You get some of these people, they're harder to interview. Then you get the one
yeah.
that you're just like a
They
glove
open
and you
up.
don't want to cut off. And then it
Yeah.
overflows into the
And
next
you're
one.
like,
And then
I
you
need to
get
go
all
to the
jammed
guest.
up. And then you're like, and then it
And,
throws you off. And
and it's
yeah.
harder if it's in person, right? If it's online, you can just say, "Oh, the next guest is waiting for me. Let me just end the call." But if it's in person, you yeah, having this rapport, and then like, and I'm like,
And
that
you got to
stuff is
cut it
just,
off. And you're like, it's frustrating because you're enjoying the conversation. So what I do is I do I try to tell everybody 40 to 50 minutes, but I give myself now an hour behind it so that I can make sure that if it does go long, there's no pressure.
yeah. And I mean, you're gracious enough to like, yeah. And if it doesn't go well, you end the meeting when it ends, and you both move and go your separate ways.
Absolutely. But I
Yeah,
definitely like doing them in person. It's definitely better. Just like I said, you get
yeah,
to see the people. I mean, like I said, you find out you watch these people on social media and then they come to your podcast, you're like, well, I thought he was taller than that. Or whatever, you
yeah,
just never they're always different. It's like but it's fun. I enjoy it.
yeah. Well, on the podcast has been around for 1 year, for 4 months. I'm curious to know, what's the growth strategy like for the podcast?
Well, it's evolving. Because we're coming out with our second book, we just pivoted on that. I mean, it's all this stuff is intertwined. So I
Okay,
don't know that
what did we
there's
start with?
what did I start with?
Yeah.
You mean is give me
You
a
said
better
you
we
you 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 mentioned that the growth strategy, like the marketing strategy, the growth strategy for the podcast is evolving, right? Now, at the beginning, at
yes.
the very point in time when you launched the first episode, the first 2 episodes, what was it like? What were you doing
It
to
was
promote the
so I had
podcast?
come out with the name Born or Made, my book. So I have a best-selling book called Born or Made, Fear is a Liar and Defeat is Overrated. So Born or Made was started with Born or Made podcast so that would all fall into my book. So
Okay.
then that's where it was. And so that was the growth strategy. And I didn't know how long the podcast would go. But then because it's starting to get some momentum and we're starting to get a lot of people wanting to be on our podcast now, the next book is called, I've got 2 coming out. Born, God, now I'm drawing a complete blank. Built Not Born is my first one, or Born to Move. And so we were wrestling with that. So we're sticking with the born part because you and I both know we were born, but
Yeah.
then it's whether or not, were we made or were we built,
Yeah.
that type of stuff. And then I like my Born to Move because I think I'm a mover and shaker. I'm a very busy person. So it evolves because I think you have to be very careful. It's like in business. I encourage people this. Unless you're going to be very specifically a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, finance or something like that, don't ever get stuck on one thing. Be prepared to pivot. So it's like the podcast. You have to be willing to move, change directions if you need to. Because if you get so stuck on one thing, you may miss an opportunity that's just sitting right there. So my strategy was, again, Born or Made, the book, and then building upon that. And then once we kind of realized this whole Born or Made thing really works, then that's where, it was Born to Move, Built Not Born, things like that. And that's where it's all kind of gone to. So that's where the strategy going forward is now. We're going to maintain this kind of born part and then develop as Born to Move, Built Not Born, that type of stuff. And so that's the strategy going forward. And I can assure you it's probably going to change in the next 6 months because something will click, something will work. And then then maybe at some point that's when we'll lock in on one specific thing. Because so something else, you asking about strategy. So when I first started, I was going to be Born or Made podcast, everything. Well, then I realized I go to this mastermind speaking class in Miami and I would tell people Born or Made podcast, but they would remember my name. So they would go to my name instead of the Born or Made podcast. So we shifted and started doing everything to LarryGDix.com because people remember your name a lot easier when, like, if you and I meet in person, I'm going to remember your name more likely than I'm going to remember the name of your podcast because everybody's talking about their other businesses, but you still remember their name. And then I got cards now that have my name, public speaker, keynote, speaker, things like that now give people that understanding. But now, if they don't remember Born or Made podcast, they're sure going to remember Larry Dix. And the good thing for me is there's not a lot of guys in the world named Larry Dix. So.
The domain name
So again, shifting. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody like, oh, you need to do this because it just depends on what you're doing, and it may pivot because even what you're doing now, learning about podcasting and stuff like that, it may shift into something totally different.
Yeah. Then the
So I
idea
don't get
is to
stuck on one thing.
test and see what works, and just nobody really has a clue, right? You just have to figure things out. And
Yeah.
sometimes certain things might work for you, and then I try it and realize that that stuff is absolute terrible advice. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing one the other day. I was doing like for my social media stuff. I'm trying to work on this because social media is crazy. This podcast and stuff's a lot easier than social media.
Yeah.
And so I was doing this thing and I was doing this and I'm in this infrared light, right? So I'm doing word of the day and I loved it. I thought it was kind of cool. Well, one of my guys that does somebody helps me, Bridgetta, my publicist, she's like, oh my God, I hate this thing. What are you doing? And I'm like, it's all, she goes, well, I like the idea, but you can't be in the red face all the time. I'm like, well, I think it looks kind of cool because if you're swiping through on social media and looking Born or Made podcast, you see the red face, you're like, oh, that's Larry Dix. He's going to give me the word of the day, right? Because everybody blends in. You're trying to get that one thing that catches people's eyes.
Yeah.
So again, you try different stuff. I got one buddy of mine, Big D. He's doing it all, and he just throws everything out there. Like he just does everything on social media, and he's had a lot of success.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like a lot of the time we are all doing other things in our head. We're like, oh yeah, this will work. You gotta just put it out there and see what works. If it flops, you learn. Okay, this doesn't work. If it works, you double down.
And
on
you
it.
learn. Right? You learn something from it. So that's it. Yeah. So like you just said, try it. I mean, what's the worst going to happen? Nobody looks at it well. I mean, I've talked to buddies. I've got some guys that do stuff. One's vegan. He does some of the craziest stuff out there. And he finds that the stuff he thinks is no.
Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind-the-scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Good always does better than the stuff that he practices and tries to put out there is content.
Wow.
So you just don't know.
Yeah, let the market decide.
Yep, and the market will decide.
Yeah. Well, so far we've talked about why you started the podcast. I just want us to look over the course of 1 year, 4 months. What has been the personal impact? In a short while, we'll get to the business and the mission impact. But for you personally, what have you learned or what have you gained from just being a podcast host?
The number one thing is that I'm not the only person that's crazy. So I have met some of the most amazing people And, some of my this I'm doing is from the legacy of my grandchildren because, I'm the entrepreneur, the first entrepreneur in my family. And, they think you're crazy, right? While you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're doing all these things. You're always pushing the envelope and stuff like that. And you find there's all these amazing people out there, and it just gives you hope. And, you get a little down and, think about, oh, the world's this and the world this. You interview all these people like, you're interviewing me, but, I'm
Yeah.
listening to you. There's all these amazing people out there, and it just gives you this it builds momentum because, like I said, some of them are drug addicts, some of them are alcoholics, dyslexic, high learning dysfunctions, and they figure out how to get around this. So it just when you listen to all these people, it just shows you that, the human is just we're amazing. I mean, it's the most complex, piece of equipment on the planet, and you just learn that, and you just get so much energy off these people because they've all gone through the same stuff you have, and you find out they're just all hard workers just trying to do the best they possibly can with what they're trying to do. And some do, and it's not about the money, it's really just the journey that these people go through, and it just gives you so much energy. You feed off of it. There are some days I get off podcast interviewing people that I can hardly contain myself. And I'm on
Oh,
a high for like 2 days because these people are just so amazing.
yeah. I feel the same. I understand what you're talking. Sometimes I have this thoughts, right? Because my kind of podcast is a bit different. So I have this thoughts. I'm thinking of a concept, right? And then in my podcast, a guest comes on, and then they share that exact thought as their favorite quote, and I'm like, what is going on here? How is this even possible? And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and it makes
So
you don't feel because so much of this what you're doing, I mean, because you're doing these podcasts, but you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to do stuff. It's a very lonely lifestyle. I mean, you spend a lot of time by yourself, and you spend a lot of time right here, right in between the two ears. And this brain that we have, which is, amazing, creates a lot of stress. That's where, born or made, and I put in there, fear is a liar and defeat is overrated, because you and I get fearful like I get fearful like you do, I'm sure. You get on this, you get all this, and 99% of the time, it never happens that way anyway. I mean, I don't know if you've ever fired anybody or had to get on to somebody that works for you, and you go in there and you have this preconceived idea of how it's going to go.
hmm,
You get in there, it never
yeah,
goes that way. Like it
that
always
is
goes
brutal.
different. And so you fear, you worry, you do all this stuff. And so there's the term fear is a liar because it's just you
Yeah.
make all this stuff up and it never goes that way.
I think the quote I remember about fear is that from the book of The Alchemist by Porcello, and that says, tell your mind that the fear of suffering is greater than suffering itself.
Yeah, because suffering, there's always an end. At some point, you may be dead, but you're suffering. Like when I work out every day, and a minimum of an hour. So I had about an hour and 12 minutes this morning, and I was suffering through some of the movements, doing these things, but the suffering does end. And
Yeah.
then the reward is the feeling of accomplishment, right? I
Hmm.
love that. That's a great quote.
Yeah, it's just that sometimes when we as you mentioned the story, I said the story, the example of firing, letting someone go in the company, you before you even walk up to them, you think, oh, this is how it's going to go. That fear, right? It's way terrible than what the way it actually plays out. Where you're like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, we have to let you go, and I mean it's hard, but it's not as brutal as what we're thinking. Like, oh man, no.
Do you know how many people? I mean, I don't know the numbers and I don't care because firing people is not something I'm excited about doing. Anybody who thinks it's a great thing is probably sick. Um, I can't tell how many times I've had to let people go, like for cause. They're actually relieved that you're letting them go because they were struggling. They knew they weren't doing a good job. They knew their performance wasn't good, and by letting them go, it's almost I've seen it. It's almost a relief. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they had fear most of the time it's not a surprise. Sometimes,
Yeah.
but as a rule, it's not.
I mean, for most of the time, if you've hired them well and if they've defined what the metric of success is for the company or for whatever the role is, right? It's easier for them to know that I'm not doing well, right? Right? Without you even telling them that, oh, young man, what are you doing? Right? They can already tell. And so sooner or later they know that
Absolutely. And we all know when we know when we're not doing a good job,
yeah,
you know. I
yeah,
mean, are there people that don't? Sure, but it's not very many.
yeah. Okay, we've talked about the personal, and then I know there are other personal benefits, but I just want us to touch on the impacts, right? The podcast has had on listeners, and then we'll then touch on the business part. For the impact, have you had messages, fan mails from your listeners, and um, how's the podcast doing? How is it touching people's lives?
Well, it gives people hope. I mean, because like I said, this journey that we're on, you're on it just like I am. And it's a lonely journey. And so what I find that people get hope. They tell me that they get hope on that, because it's physical, financial, personal, mental. I mean, all these things that we all struggle with, right? And that it gives them hope seeing that someone else is going through the exact same thing. Because what you find in every person's journey, there's no shortcut, none. I've not interviewed a single person out of, 85-ish people that ever said, "Oh yeah, I just got this, hit it, and I made $1 million." They're like, "Well, I had this, and then the market didn't, interest rates went up, or oil prices went up, or you know, tariffs came in, or whatever." And they're constantly jockeying and trying to be, and they're being nimble and trying to survive. And that's where I find is people just realize that they're not in this alone, because everybody goes through it. Again, there are no shortcuts. Everybody goes through it. Everybody's hard working. Everybody has fear. You have as a business owner, you have hundreds of defeats to get one or two wins. And so this just
Yeah,
gives people the hope, because one of the things that, like, when I was writing and I started going through some of the journey of the writing part of my first book was, and then the second book, it's just trying to be, it's a fallacy, because everything you see is everybody like, "Oh, look at this guy. He's making all this money." Well, how long's he been working at that job? I mean, my first 5 years in business, I didn't make a dime,
oh,
and so, things like that, to have people understand that, because when you look at social media, right, everybody looks good just like you, right? And then you realize, well, everybody's got to get up and comb their hair, brush their teeth. Like I tell everybody the same thing.
yeah,
Heck, when I get up in the morning, the first hour, I got a pillow crease across my face where I've been sound asleep. I mean, so I don't look this good all the time. I mean, you wake up something, not, I'm being funny about the good part, but you know what I mean? I mean, so it's a bunch
yeah.
of
I
it,
get.
it's physical, it's mental, it's financial. These are all the things that we go through. And that's the thing that this podcast does. It gives people hope. And then it also lets them see people from the time they were born to their success. Like my thing, I tell everybody, I'm a 62-year-old overnight success. I started working when I was 11 years old. And so, everybody wants what you have today. They're just not willing to go through what it takes to get there. And so that's part of the podcast, is listening to these people. Like my one buddy, he owns a bunch of restaurants, right? And
Yeah.
he does the podcast, and all of his friends are like, "Wow, I never knew that about you." And they've known this guy for 20 years.
Wow.
You just learn things about their parents and their families and struggles, and the good things and the bad things. And people don't know that. It just puts you back as being a human again, right? Because so many
Yeah.
people put you up on this pedestal because they think you've done all this stuff. We all have kids that we don't like sometimes. We don't always, we love our children, but you don't always like them, right? Your wife doesn't always make you happy. And guess what? You don't always make her happy. But it just makes people understand that we're all going through the same journey. And it's just whether or not you can tell people the truth instead, because people see this facade of all this stuff, right? And that's the beauty of doing this. And I've learned so much. It makes me feel better about myself in the mental worry that I'm doing just fine,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow. Have you ever had received a message or an email, I don't know, from a listener?
I get them more from not so much the listeners, but the people that I interview more than anything. I mean, I get stuff, "Wow, I really enjoyed this," because a lot of them are from people that know the person that does it. But the ones that you really get the most comments, and some of the people that I have interviewed, I stay in constant contact with, is just the fact that they don't feel alone anymore. They know that everybody has a struggle, because what happens is, this fear, right? The fear of failure, the fear, we're all failing all the time, and it just makes people better. So I know that in that standpoint, the 85 people that I've interviewed, I've had a huge impact on them because they now know that they're not alone and that we're all in this thing together and we're all fighting the same thing. And like I said, and then many of them I get, like I literally was just sitting there, my phone flashed. It's a guy I met 4 months ago that texts me every single day with a scripture of, God and Jesus and trying to make me feel, helping me with my salvation. And that's something that I'm benefiting from him. So I guess at the end of the day, they always say it's kind of cliche. Is I get more benefit than I probably ever give anybody else.
Yeah.
But I'm a humble guy. I just think there's, but yeah, I get a lot of comments from people, more people than I interview than anything else. But the other thing is that I'm not alone. Fear
Yeah.
is a
Well,
liar, defeat is overrated. You have to lose, and people need to understand that, and it makes them feel good about it. If there is such a
yeah.
thing, that you do get beat up a lot.
Yeah. And then one of the words you've been using all through this conversation is the word entrepreneur. And does the podcast make money? And what's the business side of the podcast?
Nah, no, it's not. It's just part of the process. We get some advertising stuff and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't make money now. I don't, unless you're in the top, probably a couple of hundred. I don't know anybody that makes them. The good news is the barrier of doing it is not that expensive. I got a, $20 Halo light, a $200 camera that I got all of these off of Amazon, and you just do
Yeah.
it. So part of it is just it's a learning process, but I have not there yet because you've got to get the quantity. I think within the next year, 8 months, I think I'll be making money, but I'm not going to be making my house payment making money. I'm not making Joe Rogan money.
Who knows?
But you never
You
know. I mean,
never
but I
know.
tell
You
people all the
never
time, like
know.
I interview the right person. Maybe you and I make the right connection, and you're the one that gets me the right person that listens, or
Yeah.
whatever. I think we're doing a great job. I think we have a great podcast, and people are very connected to it. It's just a matter of getting the right break at the right moment. And look, 80% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. If you look at the number of podcasts out there, there are hundreds of thousands of them. Most of them quit after the first year. So a lot of it is just sticking with it. I encourage you, like keep grinding, keep pushing, keep getting the podcast. Don't, mine come out every Tuesday morning, and I'm very consistent with that. And eventually those things start building momentum. And yeah, but your original question, am I making any money? Absolutely not a dime.
One thing you mentioned is that the book is connected to the podcast, and it's more like an ecosystem. Can you break down that ecosystem for us so that we can
What do I
see what
spend
it looks like? Um,
on the
that
book?
would be nice what you spend, but what I'm saying is like, the podcast is connected to the book and the book is connected to the podcast. So it's more like an ecosystem. So I'd love for you to break down what the ecosystem looks like and,
Well,
and
it
how
costs you
each
a lot
feeds
of
each
money to
other.
make no money. A book is going to cost you $15,000 to $25,000 just to get through the process. You've got to write it. You've got to have it edited. You've got to get it on the, get it into Amazon. If you do it all yourself. If you have someone help you, then you could be doing, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be people out there that spend, $5,000 and put a book out. I know guys that have spent $100,000 putting out a book, one book. It can, and you can do published, you can do self-publishing, you can do a hybrid where you do kind of combination of the two. That's what we do. The first one I went through a lot more expense to get there. And then the second one now, I'll probably be in it for 20,000 and that'll be what it cost me, but it'll be a lot less than the other because I call it the dumb tax, and you just got to spend money, unfortunately, on some of this
Yeah.
stuff to pay a dumb tax so that you don't pay it the second time. I can tell you what, it's going to cost me a lot less money to to do the second one than it did the first one. And the third one, it's going to be
Yeah.
even cheaper.
Yeah.
But you can spend as little as you want. I mean, I think I have one buddy who's got 5 books out, and I bet he probably didn't spend 10 grand. But he does it
Wow.
all himself. But he's super smart, highly educated. I can barely put 2 sentences together, and then you want me to put it on a piece of paper and make sure it's grammatically correct. I'm not that guy. So I have to pay people to do that because I can't do a lot of it. So for me, I have to spend probably more than most people. But I mean, I
no,
don't think you can,
dissect.
I don't know if you could do a book of any size. And if you were talking, like my book's 133 pages. If you were doing the average self-help book, which is about 225, I mean, you may be adding another 50% more.
Wow. Wow. You
But
mentioned the book.
podcasting, you can be in podcasting for $1,000. because I'm not even you got a cool mic. I don't even have a mic. I've got $200 earbuds. I've got a $100 halo light. I just invested in this camera, which I know cost me less than $200. You can tell by my quality of my camera because I was
Yeah,
using my computer.
let me check the name of the camera.
Yeah, it's on there. It's called
It's Insta360 Link to see.
yeah, it
Yeah,
works
it's a
great
webcam.
and it
Yeah,
opens
it
and
looks nice.
closes. It's a fantastic one. So yeah, if you wanted to get into podcasting, I mean, now you got to have a good computer. I've got a Mac, but I think I paid like $1,600 for my Mac, but my Mac's like 2 years old.
Yeah, that's the thing. The thing about this gear is that if you buy and you buy it, like, you buy when you buy something, you not buy fake or those rip stuff. Is it will you will get a return on investment as long as you podcast, right? I'm not talking about you buy the mic and you go keep it inside your bedroom and 6 months later you're like, oh, I just wasted my money. I'm like, you didn't use the mic for what you intended it for. I mean, if you use the mic, you get your return on investments. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, on and on.
Yeah, see, these are these DJI mics. Have you tried
Yeah.
these? Yeah, these
I
are
use
phenomenal.
the other one. It's from a different company, Polylac. I don't know if
These
you heard
things
of
are
it.
great, so you can put them on your lapel when I'm walking around doing stuff. I
Yeah.
bought a gimbal, which I think I paid. I bought a cheap gimbal off of Amazon. I got right here. I think I paid like $200 for that. That thing's great. I mean, you can set it up and it'll follow you, and you just download a free app.
Yeah.
So I mean, if somebody wanted to get like really crazy, I mean, for $10,000, you could have a studio.
Wow.
Those mics, depending on like, I had some mics. My mics weren't that good. I think I spent $150 again off of Amazon. Shocking. But then I
Yeah.
was in studio doing my Audible the other day, and I was sitting there talking to this guy, and I'm doing my Audible, right? So I'm in this big studio. I mean, it's like a real studio, right? And he's like, "Oh, I need you to back up." I'm like, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "I heard your stomach growling." I'm
Whoa.
like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Larry, that's a
Whoa.
$5,000 microphone." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Because these
Whoa.
guys are recording musicians and books. I'm doing my Audible. Apparently you can spend $5,000 on a microphone. So I'm not recommending that at all. But he heard my stomach growl. Well, you and I don't need that. You know,
For
I
me,
like the headphones, but I got the headphones, but yours look good. Mine were looked like I had like elephant ears. They were like this big. So I quit doing that and went back to these because I was like, they were so bad. I mean, it was just, and I look at it, and the first person that I did this with, I got done, and one of my friends or kids called me and they're like, "Dad, those are the biggest headphones I've ever seen in my life." I'm like, "Were they that big?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, yes." So, stuff like that.
I thought we were talking about standing out on social media. That would be nice.
Yeah, it would. Maybe that's what I need to do is just put them back on and do all my social because
You
those
just
things
do
are
it. Yeah. So that
they're
when you
like
see like
they're literally
that,
this
that guy
big. I
that
mean, they're
has big headsets, and like sooner or
yeah,
later, the
yeah.
company
That's the
that
guy.
produces the headset will sponsor your podcast. And
Yeah, maybe that's what I need
yeah.
to do. Like they just call me Big Head Headphone. That's me, the Big Headphone podcast. Yeah, maybe you should try
Wow.
that one.
I think ultimately the idea is have a setup that's and allows the message to get clear, right? We don't want a setup that muffles the message, right? Because
Right.
the sound is not clear, because there's noise and everything is just going on, because the people can't see your face and their expressions. Once you get the minimum, the MVP, the minimum viable product, you want to make sure that the setup is simple and easy, that it encourages you to create content. We don't want a setup where you spend 4 hours to set up. Man, if I spend 4 hours setting up my studio, by the ready for
Yeah,
us, I'll
my
just sleep.
studio's super easy, but I learned through the process like how to do the halo lights because I at one time I have windows in my I live in I don't live my car barn where I keep all my cars, and so I'm on this loft where I have this big window. Well, I look like I mean I was so white, like the light would come on, I'd be like, oh, people are like, what the heck is that guy like? They thought I was like anointed or something. So, so you learn all this stuff, but the number one thing I would tell people to get, and I learned this from John Mendez, who's a great podcaster up in Stamford, Connecticut, camera. When I did my camera, that changed everything. My quality of my videos just look better on my podcast. And he showed me. So he had one and he took it off and he goes, "Look at the difference." This was before we were recording. He goes, "Look at the difference, Larry." And I'm like, wow. I bought one that day. And,
Whoa.
2 days later I had it. And, like you already know which one it was. You can tell your listeners. And I mean, I don't think I paid $200 for it, like maybe $139 or something for it. And it's a great
Yeah.
little camera. and it's got a green light,
Yeah.
so I know it's working, things like that. And
Yeah.
if I can
Yeah.
do it, anybody can do it, because what you want is, you're very fortunate because you're young. All this stuff's plug and play now. Used to you'd have to
Yeah.
do all this stuff. Man, I just plug all this stuff is all plugged into my computer. I think it looks like
Yeah.
I'm the smartest guy in the room. I don't know jack. All I do is when I click on that link to be my interview with you, I was just, oh God, please make sure it connects.
Yeah. Isn't that what entrepreneurship is all about? It's all about leverage. It's
Yeah,
about how do you
absolutely.
leverage, whether it's capital, whether it's a labor or whatever it is, how you
Well, a
leverage it.
lot of it's
And
just
there's
leverage your
technology.
time. Like, just put the time in. Like I said earlier on these, when all these things I interview, all these people that I interview, there's no shortcuts. Entrepreneurs, that's why 80% of people fail, is because you get the entrepreneurial high, then you got to have the dip. Most people quit down here, but you got to come up and come up the other side. Your
Yeah.
success is going to be up here, but everybody quits down here. And that's what I was talking about, like podcasting. Just stick with it. I mean, you look at some of these guys or some of the original podcasters, and you go back and look at their first footage. Like, I would encourage everybody, go look at my first podcast, go look at my last podcast. There is a
Well,
big difference in the quality of the interview and stuff like that, because I just put the time in. I put in the effort. And that's so much of the podcasting, is you got to put the time in.
yeah.
It's like running a marathon. You're not going to go out and run a marathon tomorrow. You got to spend 6 months, 9 months training, and you got to put in the miles. I tell everybody, I've
Yeah.
run 2 marathons. They're not that hard. You just got to put the miles in. That's it. Then again, no shortcut, unless maybe like maybe because you're young, you can go out and run a marathon. It took me, my first one, and I only ran 2. It took me a year.
Yeah.
Second
But
one only took
generally,
me 6 months.
I think at the end of the day, still on leverage, everybody has their own fair advantage, right? And it's about figuring out what your fair advantage is. Some persons, we have the money to spend to get a team to help us work it out. For others, we're crazy good at the tech, right? And so the question is, well, what can I leverage, right? We always want to look at, so what is something I can use to like just scale it? It's like, oh, he's a genius. What's he doing? How does he do it? Like that. Have leverage.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, I wished I would have done it a long time ago. The first thing I wished I would have done was wrote a book 20 years ago. It was the best
Well,
therapy I ever did in my life, because I started reading.
yeah.
Because what you find is, with people, especially entrepreneurs, and I find this out through some of my interviews, is we as entrepreneurs focus on the gap, not the gain. So all we ever look at is all the things we failed at. We never look at this up here where we actually succeeded, because there's this big gap, right? Well, this gap is all your losses. So you got to find the win. So you got to focus. We focus on all the losses. You got to focus on the gain, the things you've done, and go back and remind yourself. And that's with podcasting and stuff like that, is like all these entrepreneurs that I interview, is you realize, they're so successful. And that was probably the number one thing I learned from one guy, was he said, you're too busy focusing on the gap and not the gain. And it'd
Well,
be the same with your
that's
podcasting. Focus on the fact that how many podcasts have you done? You say, well, I've done 47 podcasts. Well, that's the gain, because you started with one. And so for me, I've done, close to 85 ish. That's a big gain. But all I think about is,
yeah.
man, I messed up on that last podcast. I should have done this, or I should have done that. And you got to let it go and move forward, because that's part of the journey.
Well, well. Hmm. Are there any projects or experiments you're currently working on with the podcast? Any thing you're looking
Well,
forward to?
one I'm working on right now is called, the 7 steps that got me unstuck, and that's on my website now. And that's a process for people to learn, especially entrepreneurs, to try to go through a 7-step process of understanding how to get to the other side, because we all get stuck. So that's my biggest project right now. My other one is, Built Not Born. That's my big project that I'm trying to get
Yeah.
finished up by October 23rd. That's my second book. And we just changed that. We were doing Born to Move, and we literally just changed that yesterday.
Well,
So that you
oh,
talk about changing and nimble and doing all, that's how much I mean, I will change just like that, because I don't want to get stuck in one thing. Because you get stuck, you just keep digging a hole. Next thing you know, you look up and you're
yeah,
10 foot down. Stop, get out, and go forward.
yeah, yeah. Wow. This concept, this project you're working on, and the podcast we've been talking about all through this conversation. Where can we learn more and listen to the podcast?
So bornermadepodcast.com, that's where my podcast is, has a lot of stuff just on me in general. But the big one is Larry G. Dix. So it's LarryGDix.com. And that's my main website. And that's where you can go on there. And it's a free, 7 steps on how I got unstuck. I mean, that type of stuff, it's a free download. Just download it and follow it. It works. It's nothing, you're not going to see anything that's going to like, oh my gosh. But if people will just put in the effort, that's where they can find out and just find out about my journey. I'm a simple man. I started off working when I was 11 years old. And it just tells you more about what I do and how I got there. I'm highly disciplined, and discipline creates motivation and things like that. And look, I'm not anything special. I've just figured out how to harness it over 62 years. And don't
Well,
beat yourself up when you're 30 because you're not there yet. I mean, I don't interview a lot of people that are hitting it out of the park the first week. I mean, these guys, if some of them are 5 years, 10 years, a lot of them don't, they don't even know if they're going to make payroll. I can't tell how many times I've woke up, Friday morning at 3 o'clock and didn't know if I was going to make payroll. And,
yeah.
that's burdensome. But that's it. Yeah. LarryGDix.com and in bornermadepodcast.com. You can read all about it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'll be sure to put all the links in the description and the show notes so people can click and go directly to the sites mentioned. It's been an absolute joy just having this chat, and thank you, because every time I feel like this podcast is made for me, but I just remind myself that, oh, why did you start the podcast? And every time I'm listening to fellow podcasters share their mission, the goal, why they're doing the podcast, I'm like, wow, it just reminds me. It's more like I'm building an environment, right? They say if you want to if you have a big goal, try to have a conversation, try to be in the midst of people that have big goals and big goals like you too. And this is my way of doing that. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
yeah. That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story because someone out there needs to hear it.